Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar presented by AmplifAI and CMP Research. Don't gamble with compliance, why Auto QA plus AI is better than do it yourself. So we'll dive right in as people attend the meeting room here. And we'll start off with our fabulous presenters, Mark and Kotei. I'll have you guys introduce yourself. You want to go first, Mark?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Ezzell. I'm the VP of Customer Success at AmplifAI. Been here for about a year. Prior to that, I spent most of my career inside of large banking organizations like Discover Card and American Express. Most of my time there has been in strategy or MIS analytic roles, which was a nice fit when I came over here to Amplify.
Fantastic. Kotei?
Excellent. Hey everyone, I am an analyst over here at CMP Research. I've been with the company going on 2 months, so quite new, but I bring close to a decade of experience in client engagement. Started off in banking at Bank of America, where I was a front-facing sales representative. Then went to CEB, which was then acquired and became Gartner, where I was in corporate finance space, so supporting CFOs and key seconds on different topics from talent strategy, tech road mapping, cost investment decisions. Then went over to Deloitte, where I was a senior consultant in their public sector, supporting workforce transformation initiatives. So things like future state analysis and cost reduction initiatives.
Fantastic. I'm glad to have both of you here for this topic. Before we dive into it, I'll do a quick commercial plug for AmplifAI. AmplifAI provides customer experience solutions for all sorts of industries. One of our larger segments here is financial services, banks, credit unions, insurance companies, and so forth. And we provide the performance management, coaching, AI insights, auto QA layers to bring all that data together and provide ways to pull that data into specific coaching plans tailored to each agent to actually improve the metrics that you care about most. We have some recognitions, much like many companies do, but recognized by Gartner. We are a cool vendor for them. We have CMP Research, which did a auto QA Prism report, like their version of the Magic Quadrant, which includes us. So thank you for that. So we'll dive right into the discussion. The contact center has been highlighted in financial services, especially banking, credit cards, insurance, to the point of them spending multiple millions of dollars on ad campaigns using their customer service as the differentiator in why you should use them over another company because the services are very much the same. So customer service becomes a huge differentiator here. And I want to dive a little bit more into that. Kota, could you go ahead and maybe give us some examples of more than just my high level? It's important because they're spending millions on advertising for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really important question. Why does service matter, especially in financial services? And at the top of underlying all of the reasons that we could get into is loyalty, right? You want to make sure that you can provide a best-in-class customer service experience for all of your customers. Very important. But when we dive down into what that underlays, what really is going on, the first is every customer contact experience, especially in financial service, is a potential fraud opportunity, a potential fraud risk. Because the first thing you have to keep in mind is when a customer is reaching a contact center, they have to make sure that there are certain steps that they go through in order to validate that the person that they're speaking to is actually the person that they're providing support to. So the first thing that you have to be conscious of with regards to service and financial services is you want to mitigate fraud. You want to avoid any sort of fraud that might occur in that initial interaction. The second thing I'll talk about is when it comes to customer service within financial services is each contact point provides an opportunity for upselling. And if you have strong customer service and strong support within that contact center, those are opportunities for not only upselling, but increasing your net promoter score and making sure that the customer feels confident enough that they would actually recommend your services to someone else. The last thing I'll add here is with regards to understanding the market that we're in today, especially in financial services, with the ubiquity of the internet and access to so many different portals and websites in order to get your financial services needs met, switching costs are at an all-time low with regards to who you're working with. So if your customer service is lacking, those customers are going to find somewhere else to go. And we want to avoid that at all costs. So making sure your service is top tier is really a paramount importance.
Anything to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, I think he's highlighted exactly a key aspect of this, which is that from a banking perspective and an insurance perspective and a credit union perspective, they're all offering very similar products. At the end of the day, the product offerings are not in and of themselves differentiators between customers. And the cost to get multiple products, to Kotei's point, isn't prohibitive. So I, as a consumer, can move from bank to bank based on whatever I decide. And as such, it's critical that service of those individuals drives loyalty. Getting the information they need quickly, getting the resolution they need quickly is imperative in driving loyalty. Making sure that people feel heard, making sure that, to Kotei's point, when fraud happens, and it does happen, it's resolved quickly, and that the customer feels like they've been communicated to, is where service really sets apart one company from another. So it's critical to make sure that we understand inside of our call centers how our agents, whether it be through chat or any other communication channel other than the call, how they impact the experience each individual customer has with the banks.
Yeah. And we just had a retail webinar focusing on this for retail, and they're mainly focused on sales and loyalty, and getting those customers is super important here. But going back to the title of this webinar, with compliance, we have this huge other component layered in where we have to be compliant to all the regulations that are coming out that are changing all the time, and you need to make adjustments, and you need to make sure that you're following those because there are massive financial consequences or PR or customers or all of the customer retention issues that come along with that. And so that's why this advent of AI with auto QA is so important. And just to emphasize that importance, CMP's done some research here on what are the priorities of companies just in general, and the insights that you get are very much aligned to this challenge that we have with compliance in finance. And can you connect the dots there for us, Kotei?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pretty obviously, a story here is some of the big priorities. Let me take a step back. For those who are a little unfamiliar, every year CMP does an executive priorities survey where we try to get a sense of where executives are focusing their time. And this is an industry agnostic survey that we try to provide for everyone. It's not specific to any individual industry. But what we're seeing are some of the top focus areas being customer analytics and insights are important. Moving to self-service is really meaningful. Integrating Gen AI technology. So looking a lot towards the technology side of things, as well as making sure that we're reducing costs at the same time. But maybe towards the center, we notice that things like reducing fraud and upgrading QA, while important, aren't necessarily as top of mind. And what we're realizing, what we call out here and want to bring front and center is that when we think about what QA meant in the past, right? QA was going through and listening to calls, understanding what conversations our contact centers were having and making sure that they're meeting and hitting all the right notes. Those expectations are now shifting in terms of what the outcomes are that we want to have at the other side of things. So when we think about upgrading QA in current day, some of the tools and resources that we have available are actually improving customer analytics and providing more support in ways that are different in time from what we had before. If we actually take a look at some of the insights from what we've been able to see just in the financial service sector, we've noticed that a lot of the things that are coming up on the previous slide are actually very similar. directionally the same, but something that maybe stood out a little bit more was that reducing fraud was actually higher, something we'd expect. And I think we'll get more into this later on in the presentation, but really want to make sure that we highlight that upgrading QA lower on the maybe low on the level of difficulty is actually more difficult and a little bit more challenging than what we anticipated. And we'll get more into that later on.
And potentially, if you were to take just the financial segment, this list would be rearranged quite a bit because of the additional concerns that the financial industry has. But another interesting stat was this one, where 65% of executives are saying that upgrading QA is important to their strategy in the next 2 years. And the reasoning for that is for this industry, the alignment of the QA with compliance. So, Mark, could you talk to us a little bit about the evolution of this and what are the advancements? Not why, I think we all know the why now, but what are the advancements of where we where we're at today, and what it looks like in the future?
Yeah, I think so. The idea of QA and regulatory risk and compliance has evolved quite a bit since I've been in the industry in the early 2000s. I entered the industry in 2005, 2006, and a little bit before the financial crisis. And yes, we had risk and compliance, but they were their own entity inside of an operations center. And we had a quality control group, and it was usually part of the operations center. And it was really focused on doing that manual call listening that Kotei alluded to. Let's do a couple call listings per agent per month and make sure that things are going well with inside of that interaction between an agent and a customer. And then the financial crisis hit in 2007 and 2008, and we started to see more of a merger between the idea of risk management and the quality aspect of it. So 2007, 2008, the bottom fell of the real estate market. We started writing off millions and millions of accounts across all of these banks. And we're spending as much time as we can trying to collect on now written off balances. And we started to become highly focused on, are we ensuring that we're treating those people correctly when we're collecting on them? So QA shifted a little bit there to making sure that we're providing truthful information. 2011, 2012, the advent of CFPB came up from the federal government, which started to create an arm to provide enforcement actions against banks who failed or weren't meeting their regulatory requirements to their customers. And that's where you really started to see a huge shift in QA and risk and compliance. So we went from having a sort of self-governing approach inside of our call centers to every customer interaction is a potential risk that we need to ensure we're handling. And so you saw enforcement actions and consent orders coming out rapidly in 2012, 2013, 2014 through today. They're still happening today. And so companies started to shift away and look at more, what are our risky processes? And so they started monitoring processes more than people. And we started acknowledging that processes are what we're failing on. The people and the interactions aren't necessarily the fail point. And so that's been the last few years. And then in 2021, the advent of AI became increasingly more important. And so now we're able to do both. We're able to look at our processes. We're able to look at our individuals that are responsible for executing on those processes and identify where our gaps are. So as we look forward into how is AI and going to influence the auto QA and the manual call listening, it's throughput. I can do more now at a high rate of speed and get as much information as I've ever had in the past around how my shops are able to execute on the processes I put in place. That includes, are my processes good enough to meet the expectations of our regulators?
Absolutely. So that's some great insight and some good detail for those on the call that are in the weeds with this industry. And so to that point, what is the value of the AI plus auto QA that Mark was touching on right there? Kind of like, where's the best place to open up a business? What's the most important thing? Location, location. Today, we're going to say compliance, compliance. It allows you to improve your risk mitigation for all these reasons. But all jokes aside, there are a few different areas beyond this that relate to it that we can address. Anything you want to address on this before we move on to the robust list?
Yeah, so just carrying on from the previous answer around, we now can look at both sides of the coin here. I can look at interactions between agents and customers, and I can look at my processes. Auto QA allows us to take our internal compliance requirements and say, are they happening on every interaction? Am I reading disclosures where I'm supposed to read disclosures? Am I reading them correctly? Am I advising people around their rights when it comes to collection practices? It allows us to check for those things on every call, on every single interaction that we have with an agent. In addition, it allows us to understand, do we have certain areas of our people management that have opportunities when it comes to these compliance risks? Most regulators aren't coming in and applying consent orders to what one individual or several individuals in a call center are failing to do. It's usually because of systemic processes that are breaking down, like a lack of identifying someone who is out of statute, but is being threatened with a lawsuit for collections. You can't do that. And so AI allows you to immediately recognize that that's occurring and be, I wouldn't say more proactive, the call's occurred, but allows you to be a little bit better at your reaction to fixing the problems versus getting consent order down the line.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And something I would add there, and we can talk a little bit more about it here, is on the line of compliance, just a example for contact center employees who work in the insurance industry. In order to upsell or negotiate insurance products, they need to be licensed in those areas. So part of having that compliance with regards to AI and QAs, do you have the tools that are helping you upskill and train those employees in order to get those licenses so that they can be able to upsell successfully to your customers? So just something to add to the compliance aspect of things.
Absolutely. And that coaching component is where AmplifAI really focuses on taking that data and being able to identify where each person needs to improve. Typically, in a traditional setting, you would basically say, we're going to train on this month and we're going to train on this next month, but you're missing opportunities to coach where it matters in a timely fashion if you don't have that data to adapt your coaching to. So some other areas where we can see some improvements from the AI with the auto QA. Mark, you want to touch on a couple of these that stand out to you?
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest reasons that I joined AmplifAI was what we consider operationalizing the outputs. There's a ton of data. There's a ton of data. Every shop's got more data than they know what to do with. They're getting new data now. We're now being able to take unstructured data through conversations and create new data points. So we've got even more data than we've ever had before. And AmplifAI really gives you the ability to take that information, harness it, and say, okay, now what? So what do I do with that? We've had traditional call metrics inside of every call center. We've had AHT, you've had voice of the customer, you've had a quality score. AI helps to understand how those scores correlate or are causal against each other. We can look at individual lines of business or individual call types and have different outcomes for each call type using AI, where we may not have been able to do so in the past. So every call that comes to a specific queue is treated as an inbound call for fraud, even though it may have not been a fraud call. We would have measured that the same. We would have held people accountable the same way. We would have coached it the same way. Being able to do transcriptions on calls, being able to understand what the call intent was, also allows us to look at metrics differently and to coach differently. And the platform really enables you to go back and you don't have to look at that. As a leader, you don't have to know all this information. This can be fed to you. And it can tell you what each person's greatest opportunity is. And that allows you to go back and actually have a meaningful conversation that's customized for each individual inside of your call center.
Yep. We have a question that came in. Does the AI have access to account holder information in order to make sure the information shared is accurate? If so, how do you guarantee information security?
So I guess I'll take that one. Obviously, sounds like an Amplify specific question. So I guess it would depend on the implementation, right? So if you were sharing just the information from the call recording or from a transcript from a chat or a transcript from a text message, obviously the AI wouldn't have the other side of the CRM with what is the correct information. If you were to share both, then yes, we would be able to validate up against and say, hey, we're on this call, we heard the following outputs. Do those match what the CRM or the customer details say? From a data security perspective, obviously, we're using a cloud-based solution in Azure. So we ride on the backs of Azure security, but we also offer a inside of your shop deployment. So we can deploy our logic and our systems inside of your data centers to allow for complete containment of your security information. We also allow you to redact certain information before you send it to us if you would like to maintain a cloud solution to protect and to eliminate PII loss in a cloud-based solution. So there's two sort of options that are available to you to try and have both sides of that data and keep them inside of the walls of a bank, which is traditionally what banks want to do. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it does. Do you have any additional information to share on security or those concerns that you see?
Yeah, I think, Mark, you covered it pretty well. And what I'd ultimately say is it does ultimately come down to one, the product, who you're partnering with, what is the security infrastructure that they put in place. But two, again, configuration, right? There are methods in order to access information to provide meaningful auto QA that don't require the sharing of sensitive and private information. It would allow you to see the information that is relevant to your contact center with regards to who's having those conversations, what are the conversation content. So I think ultimately there is security infrastructure that makes sure that you're not having to relinquish your customers' information.
There's another benefit here that we talked about in previous presentations where we were talking about the retention of your best people. And I think in this scenario, your best people are not just in retail, your best sellers, or in straight customer service, the ones who can handle trouble tickets the best because they have the most knowledge. They have the most knowledge on how to keep you compliant and what to say and how to handle customers no matter what the situation is. And when you have the ability to pull all this information in, have the ability to tailor your coaching specifically to that agent, they're able to learn more, learn faster, improve their own skills specifically on what they need to improve on, congratulate them on what they're doing well, and that's going to increase that retention for your best people, and you're going to keep them, especially with AI agents coming to market, and the AI agents are going to be handling, or currently are, if you have this, more of those transactional interactions, which means your human agents are going to get a very large chunk or much larger chunk of their interactions being the complex ones, the complicated ones, and they need to be trained more efficiently and effectively to handle that larger influx of the complicated calls. But that's also going to help them get more pride in their job. They're going to become smarter and better faster. And then there's a metric that, Mark, you brought up a few times before of time to proficiency, which also gets people to ramp a lot faster. Maybe you could speak about the importance of that, especially in finance.
Yeah, I think the largest cost for most call centers is the amount of recruiting and turnover, so loss. So getting someone inside of a call center, whether it's a chat or it's a text message, but someone that's handling customer interactions, they have high turnover. And because they have high turnover, they're tough jobs. You really want to try to find a way to minimize the cost it takes to bring them from off of the street into a proficient agent inside of your shop. AI allows you to create an inventory of what good looks like. It allows you to create role-based scenarios to say, I'm going to put I'm going to create a real conversation between an individual and using call examples that are real, have them go through and handle the call in a safe space that's not customer facing, where they can learn the process. You can hit pause. That ability to interact and to learn the systems in sort of real life scenarios is relatively new. It lasts 5 years. So I role played when I first joined the call center in 2005. We had to go to the front of the room, and two people sat each other, and one of them talked, and the other one talked back, and it was awkward. That same thing is now an AI, and that same thing is now, it's real life scenarios that the AIs learn from other calls. And so you really have a unique ability to start ramping faster and spending less time in OJT or on the job training, less time in the classroom trying to learn the systems, because they're getting real hands-on use cases with tools that weren't available 5 years ago.
Yeah, we even have a partner that is a close partner of ours with SimTrain that will take our AI learnings from the platform, and then you can pick and feed which ones you want to put into the simulated training, and it will create an actual interaction that mirrors what AmplifAI is gathering as good and bad calls to be able to facilitate that training in a quality way. And that's the two AI systems working together. There's all sorts of opportunities to advance the level of quality of the customer experience you're providing. So let's jump into risk a little bit here. What kind of risk is involved? We've talked a lot about the benefits here, but in finance, risk is always something. It's probably more front and center than in any other industry. Mark, do you want to dive into this, especially when it comes to, say, banking, credit unions, things like that?
Yeah, I've never met a bank that wasn't proud of how conservative they are when it comes to risk avoidance. Not necessarily always a great feeling. When you're trying to make advancements in things like AI, a conservative approach is definitely going to slow things down. But banks historically have been slower to adopt change. And a lot of that is based on perceived risk. I don't know what the data security looks like. I don't know about how data breaches occur in the cloud. I don't know about what PII leaks are going to look like. Most banks have taken that approach. Even today, I experienced that on a call I just got off of, talking about with a major financial services client about how we can use auto QA in their building. And they're concerned about PII. And you start asking them questions like, where do you store your data? And they're using cloud-based solutions. They're using the same cloud-based solution we're using too. So in the grand scheme of things, the risk is minimal, but it's such a big change that a lot of folks are scared of it. A lot of folks have seen AI kind of running a mess like the Terminator and are worried that's what's going to happen, right? And that's just not the case, right? There's a lot more controls. It takes a lot more work to get these AIs up and running, and it's very targeted. From a risk perspective, while they are very conservative, it's not always a great thing, and things are a lot more controlled than it seems.
Yeah, anything you want to add to that, Kotei?
Yeah, and I think another risk to maybe just be cognizant of is reputational risk, right? If something were to happen, if there was some kind of breach, if something were to occur that got your name in the news, like that's terrible. No one wants to experience that, but especially not financial services organization. The sort of useful aspect and beneficial aspect of tools like Auto QA is that they help with mitigating these types of situations because they are helping you to identify where are the maybe loose areas that the parts of your team that maybe are missing some of the opportunities that, in order to avoid any sort of situational risk, any sort of compliance issue by providing that real-time coaching and supporting them throughout the process. So definitely something to consider and to.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good addition. So the thing you brought up that I liked is being able to have all the data there and not just in a dashboard where you're measuring what you're absolutely looking for, but being able to find sticking points, gaps in your process, things that would now if you're doing a DIY, never be discovered by you. And now with AI being able to analyze so much and being able to take that nuanced human speech and still find if you're doing something or not doing something outside of just speech analytics looking for one key term or phrase, you're able to actually enhance your coverage so much more than you would without it. So with what Mark was saying, the security of where the data is and how it's being stored and how it's transferred, there's all sorts of different options for on-prem, hybrid, all in the cloud using the same services you are, but it actually takes that next level to protect yourself. Did you, Mark, any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I think you're right on point. The idea for auto QA and the reason it's gotten so much attention over the last year, 2 years, is that it's turned this game upside down a little bit. The life cycle from identifying that there's an issue to identifying the impacted populations to correcting the issue to correcting the process was months, years potentially, in most situations. This and that was because we couldn't listen to enough volume to identify it unless you were targeting that. And even then, the human capital that's involved to listen to 1,000 calls or review 1,000 transactions is very high.
Yep.
That's different now. You can ask an AI to go over 100% of your call volume and verify, did they get ID? Did they confirm the consumer was the correct person? And you can do that in a matter of seconds. And that really goes into helping you be more, again, you're never going to be proactive, right? It's hard to be proactive on a call, right? You want your processes to be as good as they can be. Sometimes you don't know things that you don't know. And so an AI gives you the ability, as I said a couple slides ago, to be substantially faster in your reactions than we've ever been before. All of this is under the guise of trying to create very strong processes across your operations to remove the risk.
Exactly. So let's dive into a specific use case where this might be used and how that data can be analyzed, and then how actions on that speed you were talking about can actually be brought to life here. You want to walk us through
Okay.
this, Mark?
Yeah, so I think this is kick the dust off this one for a second. A credit bureau dispute. So the idea of a credit bureau dispute, someone calls in, says, hey, I see that you're reporting something on my credit bureau score, which we all love, because who doesn't love a score for how you spend your money? But I don't agree with what you sent to the credit bureau. And so there are rules around what happens next. There are rules that the agent is responsible for following that have been created by their organization they work for. There are rules that the credit bureau has created saying around how much time you have. And there are rules the federal government has put in place to say what you can and can't do based on what this person's requested. So immediately upon a conversation in this scenario, I call in, I'm going to dispute something. Agent's responsible for letting me know exactly what's going to happen next. They're responsible for letting me know what steps they're going to take, when they're going to have a response by, when they're required to have a response by, and then executing on all of those actions inside of the CRM they're using to do that. Fun, most credit bureaus make you use their CRM. So in most of our disputes across banks, they don't have they're using whatever the credit bureaus make them use. eOscar, I think, is a popular one, so they don't get to use their own. But if an agent doesn't take the actions that's required, that's a huge potential risk. If I fail to hit submit in the CRM tool to say, hey, start the clock, I have 30 days to respond, this person is out of compliance. This dispute is out of compliance. And we talked a little bit earlier about what data do we have? Do we have the CRM data? I think one of our participants asked a question around like, can you validate that what's in the CRM or the case management tool is what the person actually said? An AI can still validate whether or not a case was created for a customer dispute without having access to the CRM data. There's other metadata that can be fed to say, hey, we're expecting that this person called in and we should see a credit bureau dispute case opened up. Do you have a credit bureau dispute case? You can cross-reference those two things and get the same thing without sharing CRM data. So in this situation, let's say they forgot to send to they're disputing 4 charges. They only marked 3. In this summary, the AI can output that, hey, this is what happened. And in the metadata that was shared back with us and that we share with you, there was only 3 charges disputed. But this potential real life example, I can immediately feed that feedback to a team leader or a manager or a supervisor to let them know, hey, this call that was just completed, the following steps that you've laid out in your process were not adhered to. And that leader can then immediately address that and correct that situation before it escalates or before the 30-day window that's required by the credit bureau expires and we haven't done what's required. So now there's no card member impact or customer impact because we're able to leverage this tool to identify a really small mistake that could have ballooned into something much larger down the line. So again, the biggest differentiator that our tool brings to the table is anyone can analyze this data. Anyone can come in and transcribe and auto QA. There's lots of companies that do it. But being able to take that information and feed it back directly into a feedback loop with your frontline leadership and your frontline agents is what separates AmplifAI from others. This is already intertwined with your frontline agents. We show them their performance. They're using it for coaching. They have triggered tasks. They have daily task lists. All of this directly feeds right back into that loop and becomes a task that someone needs to do. Not a task that someone needs to go find. Not a piece of information that they'll have to mine through to understand, did we make a mistake or not? The system will do that for you and let you know, go fix this.
Yep. And you mentioned a few requirements and things that the platforms can differ around. And one of the things that we won't get to in this one, but the slides are here for you to evaluate what type of an auto QA platform you should have that can do all the things that we're talking about. There's a lot of different variation in these interactions and how they should be analyzed. And if you have an auto QA platform that only has a single intake form and everything gets fed the exact same way, that's going to limit you on what you can do. So make sure that, as one thing we do, obviously, but make sure that whoever you choose for this does have the ability to create multiple and dynamic intake forms and be able to create the framework around each one of those interactions to provide you the result information that you need in order to take the actions that you need to take. The second thing is the data consolidation. Some can only take in information from, say, a common thing is for a CCaaS platform, the platform that you actually run the customer interactions through, voice, chat, email, that type of thing. They may only be able to consume the information from that system and they can't pull in your back of house custom CRM, your WFM information, HR platform, flat files, whatever it is. Make sure that the platform you're using can actually bring together all the data you need to make your reporting a more seamless and easy experience. So with that's a good transition into where do we start? And there's a lot of places that you can start. And depending on what your contact center does, what your service team or several different service teams are looking at or doing, you should look at the thing that matters the most. We've had a few CEOs of large companies on an AI for CX webinar in the spring, and we asked, where do you start for just AI in general in your contact center? And across the board, all 3 panelists said you got to start with the specific challenge or problem that you're trying to tackle. Don't just add AI for the sake of having AI and checking the box and seeing what it gets you. So you want to make sure that you have the ability to create a very tailored experience because the different AI solutions can do so much. So in our world of finance, what are some of the more common starting points that you see, Mark?
I think that the two in the upper right are the most common. Supporting some of the statements you just made, I think there's a corporate jargon term that I used to hear all the time at Discover called boil the ocean. I hated it when I worked there, but it's very applicable. Sometimes there are new things that hit the market that are bright and shiny and that can do a lot. AI is one of those things. Auto QA is one of those things. It could certainly solve all kinds of problems. Tactically, that may not be possible, right? Coming in here and trying to monitor all of these things out of the gate would be virtually impossible for any operations. So to your point, you got to pick what's most important. I think traditionally, the call listening mantra has been focused on quality and CX, and that's what we experience with most of our deployments. Is folks are coming in and looking and saying, "Tell me if I'm meeting the conditions that are required through our quality forms, and are we driving the correct experience that we want to get for our brand?" I hope to see that it gets into more places like collections, where in the collections space, there's a lot more, and sales and collections may come as a shock to some people, are very similar. But in the collection space, did I go through the negotiation flow? I can use AI to say, did I hit all the points? Did I validate that they had means of income or in sales? Did I validate that they had a need for a product, right? I think those things will come as quality and CX are implemented in the first tranche. But today, again, to answer your question, most of what we see is that upper right corner of quality and CX on implementations.
Yes. And we have a lot of good, you mentioned collections, a lot of great case studies on collections, on different ways that AmplifAI, and could be any AI platform, but ours specifically can help the collections and total collected per call, things like that. But as I click to some of the buckets here, Kotei, do you have any additional insights on places to start or the importance of how you start?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And lots of great use cases, lots of great information. But maybe more generally, thinking about where to start, the first thing I'd call out is understand your customer's journey, right? Understand from the moment that a customer decides that they want to contact your organization, what are the reasons? What are the steps that they have to go through in order to get in front of someone who is going to support them? And then how do you resolve that problem or provide support in a way that's meaningful for the customer? And then on the other end of that, what are the things that you want to leave the customer with after that conversation? So truly understanding your customer's journey and then using that to build your pipeline for that auto QA tool, just really understanding the end to end. The other thing I'd add is, and this is something that customer clients of ours are already thinking about and using AutoQA for, is using it as a tool in conjunction with your knowledge management, right? So understanding what are the things that our agents need to know in order to support our customers, and is our AutoQA tool updated with the relevant information? Are we able to reflexively see our knowledge management in our auto QA tool? In the ideal world scenario, every time there is an upgrade or update to your knowledge management, the auto QA tool will be updated as well, and vice versa. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, but that's not necessarily where everyone is. But that is the expectation, the hope that these auto QA tools will exist in. So really thinking about how do we marry those two things together, I think are definitely important areas to consider starting.
Well, thanks, guys. That's all good and plenty. But what I hear on the trade show floor is I'm not ready for it. We're not ready for AI and auto QA or even to talk about the AI discussion yet. And I'll go back to Lee Corso, not so fast, and say maybe you are. And Mark, you brought up a good, interesting point when we were talking through the talk track for this on you're probably more ready than you think you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of what we've talked about exists in almost every single financial institution I've ever come across. You've got people handling calls. You probably have some sort of recall recording platform or chat platform or Twitter or whatever, however you're servicing your customers. I guarantee you that almost all of these are harnessing that data, capturing it, and storing it. The majority of auto QA is just looking at that existing data, comparing to what Kotei just said. What are your processes, whether that be your knowledge base, through your training, through whatever the case may be. Both of those things exist inside of almost every place I've ever interacted with. You have all of that content. The ability to put an AI on top of it and say, is it doing what I want? That's the only really next step. So most people have their foot in the door already to using an AI auto QA. It just don't, again, it goes back to that risk slide, right? Are you ready to step into combining those two data sets and letting something churn through them? And we see more and more people are at an unbelievably fast rate, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that if we had time, we're going to close it out here, but we would dive into is your vendor, whoever you choose for this. And if it's us, you need to make sure that they are taking a data first approach to this process, making sure that they're standardizing and structuring your data, making sure it gets updated frequently. And that's a large part of what it is that you're doing. You don't want to just create a framework and then say, okay, just connect a few APIs and you're good to go. There's a lot more to it in order to make the AI do exactly what you want and get the outcomes that you're looking for. It's also super important to make sure you have folks like Mark working with you at that vendor to make sure that is actually going to provide you what you want because they were former operators themselves. They know the nuances of your role. They know the ins and outs of managing a contact center and aren't just experts in that one specific technology and how to set it up. The dashboard looks pretty, so moving on to the next customer, you want to make sure that they're looking out for your business and actually looking out for the outcomes that you're trying to drive. I'll close out on Kotei, but before we do that, do you have anything else to add to this?
I think you've touched on a lot of it.
Fantastic.
Apologies. Yeah, I definitely think a lot of customers have the sense I don't know where to start. I don't think I'm ready. To both you and Mark's point, the data exists, what your problems are, and often the thing that's maybe missing is just overlaying AI on top of that. And it's not to say it's the simplest thing. Obviously, it requires some understanding of the tools, but the technology is such that implementation is a lot easier than many would realize. And I think that's a really reassuring thought.
Absolutely. So the best way to go about this too is just to educate yourself on it, educate yourself on the process. I was trying to think of it like an analogy of you're also never ready to have a kid, but there's way too many nuances to that analogy. I'm just going to drop it, but trying to make the parallel of learn about it. And CMP Research has not only this report that you can download here, but a ton of research on all these related topics. Kotei, do you want to direct people to where they can go?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to the CMP Research website, we have, as you mentioned, Scott, a ton of different resources with regards to understanding the landscape of auto QA as well as similar automation tools. But especially if you're looking for information about vendors, we do have our Prism, our proprietary evaluation tool that actually provides a grading on auto QA vendors out in the market currently to give you a sense of who are some of the top players, not just from a efficiency and tool support perspective, but what others in the market are saying in terms of understanding their awareness of those tools, how prevalent are those tools. And as you can see on the screen, AmplifAI is one of those vendors who we've identified as being leading in this space. So absolutely go to the website, take a look, and do some of your own education on the topic.
Yeah, thank you. And on this chart, it's a little bit hard to see here. You can get the full report for the full details, but we like to pride ourselves on, of the leaders, we have some of the more progressive capabilities on connecting this process and adding this technology in a way that will actually create the results that you're looking for. If you did want to check out our auto QA in just a quick demo environment, you can use one of our canned messages and calls, or you can even upload one of your own if you want. Now, I don't know if you want to do that, depending on what kind of call it is, but you certainly can play around with it and just see what the capabilities are. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Mark and Kotei, for bringing all this great knowledge to our attention. Thank you again for everyone joining today's session. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.